Hello and welcome to another Blue Tweezers playthrough with myself, Alan, from the channel. We're doing a recording here of Malta Besieged by Worthington Games. We're going to be going through the whole thing. I'm going to take you through some of the rules. There's not a huge amount of them. A lot of it is procedural. You do what you do when the sequence of play does it, and it's fairly straightforward. But we will touch on a few rules before we start. So here we have the map of the Mediterranean here, with Malta in the middle, surrounded by tracks. And these tracks, if you're familiar with the States of Siege series, are inwardly facing, and there are forces which are represented by these counters. In this case, the Regia Marina, the Regia Aeronautica, the Regia Esercito, which are seeking to, well, particularly in these two, to get to Malta, and then we'll kick off a sequence which may end up with the invasion of Malta by the Axis powers. At the start, of course, these are Italian units. Later on you will get German units coming in as well. Particularly here, this blue track is for the Luftwaffe, and this grey track here, which moves all the way around up to here, is the U-boat track. This track here doesn't actually head towards Malta, but does head towards Cairo, and this is a way that you could lose the game without Malta being taken, is if Cairo is taken. Currently it's the Italian army, so the Reggio Esercito. That will be replaced during the game by the Africa Corps, who are a bit tougher. The next important thing here are the three tracks at the bottom here: military, supply and morale. And these are resources that Malta has. Military, of course, is the military capability, armed forces on the island. Supply, fairly self-evident, the supplies for the fortress. And then also the morale, and that's the morale of the people and the soldiers, sailors and airmen on the island. Here we have a deck of cards. There are 3 decks of cards in the game. They're known as epochs, and you play them sequentially. When you play an epoch, the first card is always a particular card for that epoch, the first card, and that always comes out first. Here we have, this is epoch 1, the deck, and we have card number 1, which is Faith, Hope and Charity, those famous sea gladiators. Here we have the other 2 epochs over here. This has the starting card of Rommel Attacks, and this has the starting card of Rommel Arrives. Also, some new counters will arrive with those new epochs. We have a holding box here of counters which are in the game and can be used. Particularly we have the Malta Fortress counter. The moment the fortress is a value of 2, that can be a 3 or a 4. We also have these DRM counters, dice roll modifier counters, and during each turn the card that you're using will tell you what die roll modifiers are available for each resource or position that you wish to affect. We have a track here for convoy hits. Convoys will appear during the game prompted by a card. Attacks on convoys happen at the start of the turn. The resolution happens at the end of the turn, and when you attack and hit the convoy, you use this track to record the hits at the start of the turn, so that when you come to the end of the turn you know how many dice rolls to make against the convoy. We have a Cunningham counter, it's currently available, and this is effectively a way to affect the game once per epoch in your favour. We have the Ultra box here. There is a counter over here which you may use Ultra for 2 different things in a turn if the Ultra counter is in this box. The first thing you can use it for is convoy escort, and the second thing is you can use it for intelligence, where you can reveal the next card, and also you could replay a die roll modifier marker on one of the tracks. And finally we have the sequence of play here, which is all very set out. As you can see, no player aid cards, it's all here on the map. Going through the sequence of play, we do the headline phase, which is turning over a card. The first card is turned over for us at the beginning of the epoch. We have the military phase. This phase kind of follows the card here. So we start with the military information that happens in the military phase. That's if the convoy has turned up on the card, that's when we sort out the convoy attacks. We then have a resources phase, which the card will tell us if any resources have changed. That's these 3 tracks. And finally we have the orders phase, and that's our action phase. That's when we can do things. What we're looking to do is to keep these markers away from Malta, this marker away from Cairo. We also would be using an order to retrieve the ultra marker from the holding box once it's there. It doesn't start in the game there, to put it into this readiness box here so we can use it. We can also try to improve these tracks. We could provide air support for a convoy, that's this counter here, and we can attempt to fortify, that's the Malta counter here, to up that number from 2 to 3 to 4, and there are other, as you can see, other fortify markers here. They're very useful for trying to block the movement of these tracks towards their end. The final thing you can get to do is known as raiding. We can't do that at the moment, but that is an attempt to interrupt supply to the Africa Corps when they arrive. The orders, you will have a number in a turn, and that will tell you on the card here, this gives you 1 order, so you can do 1 thing in that turn. And the order turns into effectively a dice roll if you're not placing counters like Ultra back in the box. And you roll against the number that's on the counter, and you have to get greater than that number. So if you want to increase your supply as an order, you need to roll greater than 3. If you want to push back the Regia Marina back up its track away from Malta, you would need to roll greater than a 2. Finally, we have a housekeeping phase. The first thing that's done in there is if a convoy was prompted by the card, then it actually arrives, and you resolve the hits on this track and find out how much of the convoy actually arrived to Malta. You then determine whether you've won or lost. The ways of losing are getting the Africa Corps or the Italian army to Cairo. That's an automatic defeat. Also, if any of these counters or ones that are brought on, like the Luftwaffe or the U-boats, ever get to Malta itself, then you will run through the Operation Hercules set of rules. That will determine whether you've lost the game or the game continues. At that point, you refresh the map, so you take off all the DRM counters that you've put around the map. You'd put back the ultra marker if you used it back into the holding box. You would also check for fort removal or reduction, and check to see if Tobruk falls, which is a counter over here. Once you've done that, you go on to the next turn and you end up with the headline phase again, which is turn the next card over. Over here you have the convoy resolution display, and I will deal with that when we get a convoy and take you through the rules for that. But let's get going for the moment and see how we get on defending Malta during World War II. So the headline phase gives us this card. The military phase, there is no convoy on here. It will appear here in a sort of round target marker, very similar to the ones here. We don't have that, so then work out what happens with these military phase instructions here. We only have one for this turn, which is to improve the Regia Aeronautica, this red, and we will put it into the 2 box. That's improving it from 3 to 2. We want to get to 0. That's our military phase done. We're on to the resources phase, and again we check the card, and the card says resources none. So nothing's done in the resources phase. We get no extra resources for the moment. We now move on to the orders phase, and we check from the card that we have 1 order. The first thing we do is put out our die roll modifiers. So we have a -2 for the Regia Marina and Regia Esercito. So with a -2, That's the Reggio Marina there, and I usually put 2 +1s. There isn't another +2 in the game. 2 -1s, sorry, on the Reggio Esercito. And we also have a -1 on morale, so that's here. And we have a +1, hooray, on our military, to improve our military. And I'll read out what the card means for faith, hope and charity. The Italian Air Force launched a series of raids on Malta starting on 11th of June 1940. Uncrated, obsolete gladiator fighters, I believe they were sea gladiators, miraculously help sustain the island's air defence. Swordfish attack planes also arrived from France. The Axis bombings continued upon the Allies' neglected Fortress Malta. In our order phase we have one action. What are we going to do? So we are threatened by these counters here, not so much threatened by the army here, and we have die roll modifiers which are going to make our dice rolls worse. So we want to really avoid looking at these two for our order. Morale's not a good idea because we have a negative dice roll modifier there. We do have a plus die roll modifier for our military. However, we need to roll greater than a 4. So even with the die roll modifier, it only makes it 50-50. So I think what we might do is we might try and push back the Regia Aeronautica. So we then roll a dice and we need greater than a 2. Here goes. It's not greater than a 2, it is a 2, so we failed. That's a good start for our game. That's our orders phase, and we're on to the housekeeping phase. There's no convoy, there's no victory or defeat to worry about yet. We refresh the map, and with that we take off the die roll modifier counters, place them back in the holding box. That one as well. There's nothing else really for us to do, so we move on to the second turn. I'll end the video here, so you've got the idea of the rules and the first turn over, even though not much happened on it, and I will be doing further videos with more movement, more turns as we go through the game. So until then, thanks for watching, bye for now.